Hello, and welcome to the Canadian Story, where we discuss what Canada is, what Canada could be, and what Canada should be.
Hello, everyone, and welcome back to another episode of the Canadian Story. Today, I am joined by Tasha Fishman. Tasha, welcome to the show.
Thank you. Thank you for having me.
It's our pleasure to have you here. So, Tasha, we start every episode kind of the same way. Why don't you just detail for our listeners who you are, what your background is, and what you're kind of all about?
Yeah. So my name's Tasha, and I'm just a regular Canadian citizen, a mom of three beautiful boys. We have a home business. My husband's business is a 77-year-old business, 3-generation business that we were working at. So I feel like my life is kind of pre-2020 and then there's post-2020. So that's kind of what I was up to post kids in school. We had about 80 employees, just, typical Canadian life, thinking I was free. And currently, I feel like I am under duress and held hostage as a Canadian citizen in this country right now. And I've made extreme major leaps in my direction post 2020 and this pandemic. So my background is in behavioral psychology. I was in social work for about a decade before I joined the family business. And I'm kind of using those earlier skills to uncover and apply with this unschooling movement and being an unschooling advocate, and also working as a board of directors with Taking Back Our Freedoms. So I'm a huge advocate, obviously, for freedom, and I've been uncovering all of the things that have been hidden from us over the course of my life anyway. So things have changed dramatically in the last 2 years.
I think a lot of us feel the same way. I think a lot of us have a pre-2020 story and a post-2020 story, I would say so.
Yeah.
You said you're kind of uncovering things that were hidden from you. What kind of things?
Well, just the idea and the illusion that we were ever free. I mean, I don't know how far you want to go down the rabbit holes, but I've gone down pretty much all of them and come back up. And so it definitely changes you. I definitely had some kind of a spiritual awakening, probably about May 2020. And just so that you know, and your viewers, in March of 2020, at the beginning, I was pretty concerned about what the virus was or what was coming at us. I was watching the news. I was at home like everybody else. We laid off 60 employees, and I was concerned. The kids were at home trying to do it all. They were on online schooling. We're trying to run our business and deal with customers. It was very chaotic. And, the story they were telling us is that there was a lack of PPE for healthcare. And so, me and a few friends had this brilliant idea to use our company and our delivery service to have people drop off fabric, clean it, wash it, and then deliver it out to people who were sewing, with all this time on their hands to make these masks. So we were part of YYC mask makers. And that just goes to show you how conspiratorial I am by nature. I really just thought, hey, like maybe that is the key. This is what they're telling us. Like I really trusted our health authorities, our governments, not about everything. There's a few things I've always been awakened to. But in terms of this, why wouldn't I trust what they're saying? I had no reason not to. So I was totally on board until about 2 weeks in. And, I had some people sending me some information, a different narrative, a different side of the story. And something just didn't feel right. So I slowly started to back away from that initiative. And then I just, started doing all my own research. And, it led me to, the WEF, the World Economic Forum. It led me to Davos. It led me to everything from chemtrails to just every rabbit hole there was, and just health in general, and who was running the show. It's down all the way to climate change. I mean, it's like unraveling a sweater, like a piece of yarn. It just keeps going and going and going. And you're like, oh my gosh, this life that we're living wasn't what I thought it was. This whole thing is a lie. So that's how I felt anyway. And I was quite happy to find other people that were feeling the same way and going through the same kind of dark nights of the soul, so to speak, right? When you're awakening to this kind of controlled matrix human farm that we live in.
Yeah, I can very much echo all of that. It's a weird thing when you start going down those rabbit holes and you think, oh, like, oh, this thing looks compromised. Oh, I didn't realize that this one thing is compromised. And then you sniff around a little bit more, and then you're like, oh, but like if this is compromised, and then you look over here, oh, looks like is government compromised? Is
Yeah.
health compromised? Is our schooling compromised? And if you spend long enough down there in that deep and dark and scary place, it turns out probably everything is compromised. So I wanted to ask you first, as a behavioral psychologist, what do you make of the psychological phenomena of the past 2 years? Because it kind of feels like, in one sense, I mean, we have to acknowledge that there was a health event, because COVID-19 is obviously real and people catch it. I've had it. I know many people who have. But the reaction to COVID-19 seems to stray off of the logical course of what a common sense reaction might be. What do you make of the psychological environment of the past 2 years, and where, as perhaps a society, collectively, our brains are at?
Well, first of all, I'm not a practicing behavioral psychologist, just to make that clear. My background in university was psychology, behavioral psychology, and I've always been interested in how we behave, even myself and just, as a group at large. So I have a bit of a background with that. But more recently, my coach now is Jason Christoff, and I've really gotten into learning about self-sabotage and trauma-based mind control, and the ruling elite families who govern us, who have been for actually centuries, who hide behind shell companies and actually use things like bioweapons in terms of hurting, I don't want to say the cattle, but the humans, all of us. And they do it through bioweapons like the TV, for example. And a lot of people you could scoff at that, but I'm sure a lot of your viewers are aware that the CIA has actually admitted that it is, a bioweapon, and it's used against the people. And you can go back to Project Paperclip and many others to see that that's indeed true. So there's subliminal messaging within the TV, the movies, all of it, the screens in general. So how I see it and what I've uncovered is that real scientists have coined it most recently as mass formation psychosis, Dr. Malone specifically. And, that's what it is. I think that when you use fear, when you get down to the basics, there's a certain part of your brain that shuts off, and you end up working in the limbic system of the brain, which is the part of the brain that is, if you saw a tiger, you're not going to be feeling, if you saw a tiger and he was about to attack your kid, you're not going to be thinking about compassion for the tiger or the consequences of killing that tiger. It's a very dark place where you go to and you react, and it's a violent place. It's an irrational place of the brain. And the people that rule us, from what I've uncovered, have been studying us for a very long time. And they know this. They understand this about humans. So this is, when people say a psyop, it really is. It's a psychological operation of mass control, right? Feeding the public with fear. If you think about it, at the very beginning, when we were all at home for those first 2 weeks, why did they close off the parks? They put like police tape around the parks, around the rinks, around everywhere. It wasn't about the virus. It was because they wanted to keep us home. They want us to keep us on the screens. They had to make sure that this narrative was sold and that we were all in alignment under this mass formation psychosis, right? Using the bioweapon. So it makes sense once you do your research and you go through the pain and the discovery that, is it possible that these people that are in power, that are other humans that we've placed there or maybe voted, maybe unelected, actually don't have our best interests. So, it's a trauma-based mind control. If you even look at, I don't watch mainstream media, but I can definitely get enough from alternative sources to know what's going on. If you look at what happened with the trucker convoy, it's gaining momentum. They pretend that it's their day, they squash it, and they're on to the war at Ukraine. War in Ukraine, half the people aren't buying it because they know, and they're waking up to the lies and corruption. Bang, we're on to monkeypox. It's like, if you can keep the human brain in a perpetual state of fear, you can keep them. They will give up their power. They will give up their power more readily and easily if they are in a state of fear. It is from a very, very old Marxist playbook. These people are not creative. They've been using the same thing upon us over and over and over again. You look back in history, it's create the problem and make it so bad for the people that they will beg for the solution. And you had the solution the whole time.
Yeah, it it is at the very least interesting. I kind of had a small sense that like the world maybe wasn't as you saw it before the pandemic. I've always had just like this idea that like, I feel like not everything quite makes sense, but it wasn't like a pressing issue because it didn't seem to directly affect my life. But then COVID-19 happened, and I started to really pay attention. And it is interesting when we all like the one thing I think that they didn't account for in the playbook when they kept all of us at home is that a lot of us had a lot more time on our hands to try to figure this whole thing out. And I was one of those people. And as you started to see the way they were handling situations, you started to be able to recognize patterns. And I need to preface the next statement with the fact that I am not a foreign policy genius. I have no business with foreign policy whatsoever. But when the war in Ukraine happened, it was painfully obvious that there was one approved way to see it. And I'm not advocating for Putin. I'm not saying Putin's a good guy. I'm not saying anything. Frankly, I have nothing to say about it other than the fact that there was obviously a prescribed narrative, because I had spent the past 2 years directly and carefully observing the COVID prescribed narrative. And it makes you wonder, how long has that been happening? Because now I see it all the time. It's like, oh, monkeypox, Ukraine, like whatever. They use world events to push people into a way of thinking. That's obvious to me, at least. But like you said, it goes back centuries. Like, how far back do you think it goes?
Well, I've been just recently studying even the word media. It comes from the certain people called the Medes. And the Medes were a tribe of people that came to the kings and the queens of the day and said, we can help you. They did kind of black magic, and they started this way back in when they would have not town halls, but gazebos, and they would have theater back then, and they would use lights, and they would have the people, and they would entertain them, and like even back to the days of the gladiators, all that entertaining and and then that goes into also the sedation, right? Keeping the public sedated with alcohol and coffee, and when you go, I know this might sound really radical to a lot of people, but they're using more than just TV, radio, and books and literature to persuade the public. They've been doing this for a very long time, so it's through that and sedation. So I mean, all the information's there. Maybe a little hard to find. You got to be creative because they're scrubbing so much off the internet. But it's they've been who knows? I mean, I can only estimate that they've been doing this for when you look back to the Medes, that's centuries ago. So who knows, for as long as there's been a ruling power. And I mean, they're kind of, when you really look into it, they date back from the same ruling elite families, date back all the way to the days of the Pharaoh. So, I mean, you could go that far back as well, but you got to do your own research on that one.
Yeah, you have to take personal responsibility. It's kind of up to you, because the information isn't readily presented to you. You have to go find it. I was reading, before we hopped on this call, I was reading your bio. It says that you did work as an outreach worker. Do you want to talk about that? What was that like?
Oh yeah, that was yeah, for, a decade I worked in family services working with families who had children with disabilities. And yeah, I worked for a really great organization, and through that I had met many, many families who were vaccine injured and had children that they believed after the vaccine were never the same. I worked with a lot of Asperger's boys in particular, autistic kids and families. And so in my 20s, I didn't think much of it, but I definitely got close to many of the families and knew that they felt gaslit by the industries and the health professionals, and they didn't trust certain medical models or professionals because how they were treated afterwards. So, like, as at the time, I wasn't a mother in my 30s, so I didn't think much of it. But once I got pregnant in my 30s, I remembered that, and I started to look into, and I went down. So that's what I say when you were saying you kind of felt that you were awakened to some of the things. I think we were all on different various levels. I too was awake to a few things just by my experience. So that led me down a lot of research about vaccines, and I was just floored. And so I quietly chose not to vaccinate my kids. And until I got really pressured when they were about 7 and 8, and when they were in school, and I did the measles, mumps, rubella, and they were very, very sick, and I regret that to this day. But then 6 months later, um, the coronavirus came and the whole thing blew up. So it was good. But up until then, I hadn't vaccinated them, and I knew that that was a source of contention. And I heard the ways people spoke, and most people don't even know in Canada that it is a parental right to not vaccinate. So it was really easy for me. It was almost like a light bulb went off in May of 2020 when the CEO of the Calgary Flames, who was shutting down for the season, said, when they find a vaccine, we'll all be able to be together again. And I was like, bingo, they're going to try to vaccinate the planet. That's what's happening here. And I just went, further and further and further with research. And yeah, so that was kind of the catalyst in my outreach work.
That's interesting. So, I don't like the term vaccine hesitant. I don't like any of the terminology. I don't like anti-vax. I don't like vaccine hesitant. I don't like any of the labels because labeling people kind of takes away from their individuality. But so
Well,
you were
if
kind of,
anybody, I just want to say this, if anybody got turned off by what I just said and said, oh, she's an anti-vaxxer, you're still under trauma-based mind control, just so you
yeah,
know,
yeah,
because that's not what this is about. It was about a choice. I made an educated, informed decision at the time because of my experience that had led me through my outreach work, which is amazing. And I thank God that I had that experience. But most people, as we can see, don't even know what informed consent is or have ever had it, really.
yeah, no kidding. And when the COVID-19 vaccine happened, and I saw a lot of people make the argument that, oh, well, vaccinations have been mandatory for forever. Like you have to get certain vaccines to go to school, which is what a lot of people think. I'm not a father yet. I haven't had the experience with my own children, but I know that my own mother was very hesitant to vaccinate her children. And to be honest, I don't remember which vaccines I did and didn't get, but I know that certainly didn't get all of them. And I know that she was able to go to the school board when I went to high school and say, here are the records. He's not getting any more. And we were granted approval for that. So people don't even realize, people, especially people who are making the argument, the mandatory vaccine argument isn't very strong because there was always the opportunity for exemption should you choose to ask for it. Correct?
There's actually no such thing as an exemption. And I've gotten through school all the way till I pulled my kids out in grade 4 and grade 3, and every daycare and every facility saying, no, we choose not to vaccinate. No problem whatsoever. Nobody has ever questioned me besides getting, maybe the eye roll at the hospital with a broken arm, or, somebody saying something under their breath. Legally, there has never been a case where you had to be vaccinated. In certain states that's the case, but again, that just shows you how people believe that they've come to their own conclusion about things by, and I used to do it myself with lots of things, so I'm not on a high horse here, but somebody who just said that to you, they just said that to you because they heard it from somebody else. They didn't actually know. I can actually tell you because I've been through the Canadian school system with my kids and had no problem. And I actually looked up the law. So I knew what my rights were. And I think the last 2 years has been a huge test and a crash course for us in figuring out what our rights are when it comes to masking, when it came to vaccination. I mean, they're all things we took for granted and we just thought we were free. But that argument alone shows you that people are still under this kind of mind control.
Do you think it's getting better or worse? Do you think people are figuring out that they have rights and that they need to stand by those rights? Or do you think we're going the other direction where people are so gaslit and so fearful that they're just willing to give up whatever they have to because they think the government will keep them safe?
Well, I think it goes down to percentages. I think, there's 30% of the population that's under that trauma-based mind control, believes CBC, the Canadian Brainwashing Corporation and CNN and all of these are truth, right? And they are so full of fear and they're triple vaxxed and they're going to be ready when they're told monkeypox. I mean, I see people all the time, I'm sure you do too, wearing 2 masks still outdoors. So, there's going to be 30% of the population that are probably gone, long gone, and there's really no hope for them. And, I love them, wish them well, but can't focus on those people. There's 30% of us that weren't going to do it, weren't buying it, aren't buying it, won't, and will die for our freedom. And then there's 40% that were coerced into doing it, that did it for circumstances that they, save their job, save their whatever, travel, who knows, and that are the fence sitters, I call them. And they are, quiet and maybe subdued and sitting back and watching, thinking this isn't going to come to their front door. Do I think it's going to get worse? I think it's going to get a lot worse. And I think the divide between that 30% that's fearful is going to be much, much more. But I also see people in mass waking up. I mean, even if you look at your social media feeds, when I first started posting in May 2020 and people were yelling at me and screaming at me and I was losing friends and acquaintances and businesses. And, I've walked through that fire of initiation and I'm literally surrounded by lions now. So perhaps it's getting worse to some people, but I don't surround myself with people that are in that mindset. I surround myself with people who are strong and, willing to stand in their sovereignty.
Yeah. Yeah, it's so fascinating. Do you think, so you say 30%, do you think, so it's supposed to be like 90 or 92% of Canadians have 2 doses. Do you think that's true,
I don't
or do you
believe
think
that.
do you think the
I don't
numbers are
believe that.
budged? Yeah.
Yeah,
Why?
no, I would
What's your
never
basis?
believe.
What's your basis for that argument?
Well, because they're liars. It's complete liarria. It has been since the beginning. These people are compensated to lie. They are not in alignment with, real humans. These are unelected health bureaucrats that are being told what to say, what to do, and when to do it. I mean, you could clearly see with Jason Kenney. I mean, there was a time where you could see he was remorseful. He even said it himself that he was sorry for shutting down the hairdressers and the small businesses, and he wouldn't do that again. And this was like the second lockdown. And literally, you see him, something happened to him. Like whatever phone call he got or videotape he got, something happened to him that 2 weeks later he shut us down entirely. And I mean, the guy looked white in the face. So, these people that are ruling us aren't who we think they are. And I don't even know if I believe that we have a democratic process at all, or if we ever did. I mean, I just think a lot of these people are selected. I mean, you can look back and research who is from the global leaders and who is, who's been kind of grown up in these elite families, such as Trudeau, to be positioned in these powers in these of government. So I know, and I've done some research on statistics, how they lie about statistics. One of the things that they do is, and they have psychologists who are on board to work with this stuff. And I know this from my background. They will say things like, even with Jason Kenney, let's just say it's all bullshit. Oh, I don't know if I can say that, but
Yeah, that's fine.
let's
Yeah,
say
knock yourself
so
out.
51.3% or whatever they're saying the vote was, right? I don't even believe for a second it was that. They want to trigger the herd mentality. They want to trigger the idea in your mind that the majority wanted this. And I don't believe it. Like there's so many things. Like we've gone from, they've said, well, we need 70% for herd immunity and then we can back off. Oh, now we need 80%. Now we need 90%. Oh, 90% of people are vaccinated. Oh, only 80% with their first dose. Now we need this. I mean, it's just, listen, you can only trust a liar so many times, shame on me once, shame on you twice. So that's why.
Yeah, the goalposts certainly seem to be fluid, don't they? They just continue to
Mhm.
move further and further down the line. Um, I want to talk next about homeschooling. You said you pulled your kids out of the public school system. I too was
Mhm.
homeschooled all the way until I went to high school. I am so thankful that I was. I think my mom made an amazing decision. Why why did you choose to do it? What did you see?
Um, so I'm doing something a bit more radical. I'm unschooling, and unschooling is very different than homeschooling in the sense that most homeschoolers, you kind of emulate what went on in the classroom at your kitchen table. I tried that, but basically, the reason I pulled my kids out of school is because I didn't trust the government anymore. And I didn't trust the hysteria that was going on in the schools. And in May of 2020, I had a spiritual awakening, and I knew come the fall that we would have teachers in masks, hand sanitizing kids to death and screaming at them to stand 6 feet apart. So there was no way I was going to put my kids in that kind of environment. But I was the quintessential matrix mommy prior to that. I saw no threat, never researched the curriculum in public school, didn't think twice about it. I had my kids in private school and public school. I knew the systems very well. And it was like, get on that bus, kids. This is, my time to work and do my things. And that's how I thought of it until I saw the threat and felt the threat. So it was a very easy decision. It wasn't easy in terms of how am I going to do this, but the sense of urgency was there. So that was the first, that was, September 2020. And I thought, I'm going to be the best teacher. I'm going to go to the school, like teachers shops, and I'm going to get all the alphabets, and I'm going to make this great thing. It's going to be so amazing. They're going to love me. And it was like a big crash. After day 3, I was like yelling and trying to coerce them and then trying to bribe them to sit down and do their work. And I was just feeling defeated. And luckily, through this holistic psychiatrist that I follow, Kelly Brogan, I ended up meeting Dana Martin, who's the founder of Radical Unschooling in the States. And she's been doing it for decades before me. And so she became my mentor, and I hired her and did a course with her for about a year and a half. And I've completely changed my entire shift in paradigm of, how I parent, about kids. And it's funny because what's going on a macro level with our government, we are in an authoritative paradigm. We are in an authoritative relationship with our government, and an abusive one at that. And I feel like I recognize that in my own home children and public schooling. We don't have a choice. You had a choice. You got to stay home and be homeschooled. And that's wonderful for you, which is probably why you're on this podcast and probably successful. And you've had the time to pursue your passions. But most children, including myself, were just pushed on that bus and you had no choice, right? So if you look at a massive scale, what that has produced over a few generations is a bunch of compliant, obedient order followers. That's what we have here. That's why this is going on. The root of it, the root of this psyop is public schooling. But it takes a while and you have to connect the dots to get there. And it took me quite a while. And most of the work of unschooling is deprogramming yourself as a parent, somebody who's gone through the school system. Like you could not stop your kids from learning if you tried. We just have to get out of the way and be there to facilitate and help feed their passions and their desires and give them the confidence to follow and pursue those passions, whatever they are. So unschooling is very different. We don't do curriculum. We don't do anything that we don't want to do. We all pursue our passions. We all pursue our interests with a reckless abandon. And education is just a byproduct of that.
That's fascinating. So does the unschooling, so am I correct in understanding that this unschooling program has resources for both children, but also parents who have gone through the education system?
My program specifically, is that what you mean?
Well, you just mentioned that part of unschooling is like breaking what some of the things that you learned in the public
Right,
school environment.
right.
What sorts of things, like, can you go into that a little bit more? I'm interested to hear about that.
Oh, yeah, sure. So for myself, for example, I had a lot of myths that I had to break through. Like, and I'm sure some people will relate to this. Like, the old adage, do as I say, not as I do. If you look at the government at the time, right, they were dining maskless and traveling and sneaking out, even in Alberta during the lockdowns, and increasing their raises while they were taking and shutting down businesses across this country, right? So the do as I say, not as I do. So that's on a macro level. So I had to, I started to think about that, where I was doing that with my own children and in the ways that I taught them, and that was happening too. So I had to kind of get out of that, from that authoritative paradigm, into a more partner-based parenting, a partnership, parenting partnership. Don't question me. Do it because I said so. I've said that myself. I'm sure lots of parents can relate. Think about that on the government level. There was no room for public debate. When we were in Ottawa, we set up a respectful public debate and invited Teresa Tam and Dr. New to come meet Dr. Byron Bridle and Dr. Alexander and Dr. Roger Hawkinson, and they didn't even show up. So kids should be seen and not heard. A prime example is Trudeau not coming out of his office to address his people. And so what I learned from what I'm learning from the freedom part and the bigger part, the macro level, is all of these things are being done to our kids as well at home, right? Or in the school system. And ultimately, control invites rebellion, right? So if I can unprogram myself on what I've been taught, because we're trained how to teach our children, we're trained how to act and how to be. It just keeps going on generation to generation. So if I can deprogram myself and get to a place of mutual respect and understanding and partnership, I won't have that kind of conflict with my kids, and I can meet their needs, and we can actually live together harmoniously without an education system, without this paradigm, this structure, this institution that they've set up, and to make us believe that we don't have the capabilities of doing this. Like, the biggest thing I hear is, "Oh my gosh, I could never do that." Well, how do you know they're learning? Well, what do you mean? I could never sit and teach my kids anything. Well, that's because that's not what we're doing. We're actually just living, and the world is our classroom. And I understand how difficult of a paradigm shift that is. And that's kind of why I created Unschooling Our Kids, and these coaching courses and community-based coaching courses for parents who are making that switch. Because obviously we see right now that there's a huge movement where parents they don't know what to do, but they know they don't want them there. They don't feel that they're being served, right?
So that's something that you've already done. You've already created these courses?
Yes, yes.
Why don't you please go ahead and plug that in case
Mhm.
there's anyone listening who wants to have
Yeah,
more
you can
information
just
about
go
that.
to tashafishman.com. Yeah, that's it. And it's on there. I do weekly international group coaching that starts next Monday nights, and you can pop in anytime. And we talk about all the messiness of it. We talk about any number of different topics. And I also do one-on-one coaching as well for families who are starting or struggling or want more attention and information in that way. And there's lots of resources on there and tips and tricks and good stuff.
That's awesome. I think education is a huge piece of this puzzle. When you zoom all the way out and you look at the situation that we're in, independent thinking certainly isn't a priority of the modern school system. It's in fact it seems to be incentivized to not think for yourself, right? I remember struggling with that in high school. Maybe it's because maybe I noticed it. I'm just thinking about this now. Maybe I noticed it because I did come from a homeschooling background, but it drove me nuts how like the entire system was just set up to, here are some things, present them to me so that I know that you know these things, and then you're good. And I was like, that's kind of dumb, because I can learn things without having to regurgitate them in a format that you're looking for. I always did quite well in school, but my mom had to beat me into a pulp to actually make me do my assignments. I understood all of the material, but I didn't want to regurgitate it. I was like, that's a waste of time. I already know it. It's fine.
Mhm. Yeah. And so part of the unschooling philosophy is allowing your child to have freedom of mind, right? So there's actually not a lot of studies on children in unschooling, other than that children that are unschooled that go to university are quite sought after and have no problems. But in terms of actually studying what they know, the lifestyle itself is one of deep respect, where we don't poke and prod our kids to find out what they know. And we understand that comparison kills joy, and that's not the way we live our lives. So we're not interested in finding out what they know more than another person. It's not really my business what they know, in particular at any given time. That's the problem. When you think a child ought to know something, and you force learn, you end up just ruining your relationship with that child, which is what you see after, how kids are really excited in kindergarten and grade one. And then you fast forward 10 years later and they're all subdued and they hate school and they don't want to be there. And that's exactly what you said is right with regurgitating. So it's really full of useless facts, right? That you memorized. If you think about school, I remember going to university and thinking, okay, I got to figure out what prof wants what right away. How do they like it? What kind of hoops do I need to jump in? How do they like their papers, right? Find out right from the beginning, and then you know what to do. It's a big dance that you're doing. And in school, I mean, think about what you really remembered. You might have remembered maybe one or two teachers that you actually connected with, that were actually saw something in you. You might remember a couple of your good friends. You might remember maybe 2 or 3 projects in that 12 years that you were lit up about. But other than that, give me a break. I mean, even the fact that when you're homeschooling, they say that you only need, like, at the time my kids were in grade 1 and grade 4, they said that the little one needed half an hour of sit down time and the grade 4 needed an hour and a half. Well, what are they doing for the other 5 hours? Like, what are they doing? Oh, right. They're waiting in line. They're standing in the bus. They're listening to the bell. They're getting ready. They're putting their hand up, waiting for the teacher. So, I never looked at the system before. And when you go back to, if you read a book called Weapons of Mass Instruction, that is from a particular teacher who won the Nobel Prize, for being a teacher in New York State, came out of the system 30 years later and went right back to, historically, to where compulsory school started, and explains how it is designed to destroy the creativity and imagination of the child. Just the way they have bells. If you look at it, it is like a little prison. It is setting you up to learn to look at the authoritative figure. Don't talk to your neighbor. Listen to what they say. Be scared, be attentive, all of the things, and follow orders. And that is the problem today. That is the problem. That is why we're still in this mess. We all have been traumatized. But if you go back to the who started and who funded, who is it? It's the same players. It's the Rothschilds. It's the same families, the same ruling elite families. What else do they own? All the pharmaceutical industries. Who do the pharmaceutical industries fund? All the universities. So, you can say, oh, this guy's so smart. He's a doctor. He's this and that. No, he just learned to regurgitate really, really well. The pharma-based education system that he's supposed to, and he can't think for himself. So there's no critical thinking going on, right?
Mm-hmm.
It's extremely dangerous. It's extremely dark. And we have to create a parallel society. We have to step away from these old systems and start from scratch.
I believe that. I believe the more and more I think about this, I believe in shrinking your world. We have spent the past, as far as I can tell, well, really since the Industrial Revolution, trying to globalize markets, trying to globalize ideas, trying to globalize everything that we do. And I think if things go the way that we hope they go, we'll look back on that and realize there might be some very great benefits to certain aspects of globalization, but things like community, things like where you get your food from, those sorts of things should be held locally, because plugging into a small group of people, into an ulterior motive of education, into local food. I mean, I was reading a book called Eat Dirt. I can't remember the name of the author right now, but one of the biggest premises of the book was, if you eat food that is grown close to you, it instructs your gut, your microbiome, to have the correct bacteria to break down that food. And if you're constantly calling stuff in from all over the world, your gut doesn't know how to react to all of those different signatures and process the food properly. I think we've stressed globalization, and we should shrink that and go for small. What do you think?
Oh, 100%. I mean, I know that from moving to Mexico with my kids. Immediately, I was told to start eating all the local fruits, everything around, because our guts were all acting up, trying to acclimate to the food. So that's a very true statement. And I don't think there's any benefits to globalization. And the reason I say that is because it's all a lie. The people that are trying to pull this con over us are lying to us. What they do is they take something like sustainability, and they hide behind it. They make up these, niche terms to make us sound like it's going to be great, and you'll eat your mealworm bugs and you're going to love it, and it's going to help the environment, and it's for the benefit of all, and and it's this is why you can't buy any of it. You can't participate in the lie, whether it's talking about any benefits of globalization, right down to the small things of like, well, maybe there is some things that they're saying. I mean, they can take a grain of truth and just wrap lies around it. So, absolutely, we have to start local. I'm in touch and making relationships with all the farmers around me. I have to learn how to grow my own food again. We are so far off the mark. We have been led so far off the mark on purpose, and we need to get back to our roots and finding local, like-minded people to support each other in this new wave, this new movement. Because as you asked me before, do you see this getting worse? I see the divide just becoming more, 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 more.
Yeah. Yeah. How have your boys responded to uneducation?
Well, it's unschooling. Let's correct
Sorry.
that. It's not
Sorry. My
uneducating.
my
And
my
I will
apologies.
no, it's okay. And I will say that because a lot of people hear that and they actually think unschooling means uneducating, which it's quite the opposite. You actually need to probably be more present of a parent than ever, because sometimes maybe your kid wants to start an experiment at 8 o'clock at night. Sometimes they want to do because when they're ready, you have to be there to deliver. So yeah, I just want to make that inference. But um, they love it. They love it. I mean, when I was in Ottawa for 5 weeks, my 11-year-old was thinking he wanted to go back to school. And so, of course, I would honor that if he wanted to, because that's what you do as an unschooling parent is you honor all of their choices. But it's a very different experience going to school, knowing you can leave at any time than being forced to go to school. So you would still be an unschooling parent. But I realized, and he realized, that it wasn't that. It's just that he missed mommy and I was gone. And he was with my mom and my husband. And so I really needed to be present. And 5 weeks is a long time for an 11-year-old, even though he kind of understood what I was doing. But yeah, so they love it. They love it. And I love it too. And it wasn't easy at the beginning, and I'm not going to sugarcoat it. And it has its trials because, again, it's the parents that need to deprogram and trust the process. And now that it's been years, I actually see that they are learning all the time. And I don't need to do it by giving them tests. We do it by connection, and we do it through conversation. And it's like you said, you didn't want to do those assignments because you already knew it. It's like if you and I are having a conversation right now, right? And then you say to me after we stop this Zoom call, and you say, Tasha, I want you to write down how the 10 points of what you shared, and the protagonist and the characters of the thing. And you know what I mean? It would be so tedious. And I'd be like, why? We just connected. I just told you what I knew, right? Or if I was sharing a book with you, or you were sharing a book with me. And so we just don't have that same respect with our children. We've lost that. And we think that we need to make sure that they're on par, and that they don't, they're not behind. And those are all things that I had in my mind as well, that I had to deprogram from. So it is possible to do that. And in that process, you will find freedom and harmony with your kids.
That's beautiful. Are you familiar with Yuri Bezmenov?
No.
Yuri Bezmenov I believe he's passed away now, was a defected KGB agent, Russian KGB agent. And I'll send it to you when we have this wrapped up. He talks about subversion and what espionage in the real world actually looks like. He says, and it's interesting that you brought up the CIA at the beginning of the conversation, and how they purposely inject ideas into film, into TV, for the sake of controlling thought. That's a real thing. So it's interesting. So Yuri says espionage is not 007. It is not, special agents behind enemy lines. In a sense, it is If you really want to capture a country, how do you do it? Well, you put people in office. And once you've put people in office, you put people in the education system. And once you have the education system, then you're good. It just takes 20 years because that's how long it takes to corrupt a generation. Because that's how
I
long it
did
takes
see
to
him.
educate it. That's how long it takes to educate a generation. And he said, this is literally what the USSR would do. They would put people into the education system and they would break a country down from the inside by teaching them how to think.
I do remember seeing him. It was like an older video of him, like in the 70s or 80s, right?
I think it was
Talking
the 80s,
about
yeah.
this
So I
and
guess you've
how,
seen it, yeah.
yeah,
It's an hour
I
long.
did see it.
It's an
And
hour long
it's
presentation. Sorry, go ahead.
no. I just remember just being fascinated by like, this is what is happening. This is what has happened. They have infiltrated all of our public systems and our private systems. And, and we are starting to lift the veil. It's like being in the Wizard of Oz, and we're actually going to, see who's behind the curtain. And, it's a very small group of people who are ruling us or think they're ruling us, and they are starting to lose control.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I'll for anyone who wants to check it out, I'll make sure to put that video link in the show notes. Before we close up, why don't we talk about your time in Ottawa?
Yeah, Ottawa, very exciting. That was just such an amazing thing that happened. So I saw the convoy starting and through other social media and alternative platforms, and I was just so excited. I was just like to the moon, like finally, I'd been protesting in small towns and big towns for 2 years and unschooling the kids and kind of wondering where the men were. I mean, there was a lot of men. There was a lot of good men. I wouldn't say a lot. There was a few, right? But a lot of it was like us moms and grandmas, out. And there wasn't enough men. And that I didn't know at the time, and I hadn't gone down the rabbit hole of understanding the psychological attack and chemical attack that's been going on for decades with men. And now I do understand that. So now I understand very well why the men didn't rise first. And I know there's lots of women truckers that did the lead here, but to see them coming, thinking, oh my gosh, I kept calling them the alpha variant, like, yes, the men have risen and they're in their big trucks. And so I was like, what do I do? Do I take the kids? Do I drive? Should I make this into an unschooling project for freedom? And obviously it's too dangerous to go with my kids and to take them because I couldn't, there was too many factors and variables I wasn't sure of. But anyway, long story short, I ended up organizing a way to get there. And I ended up being with Dr. Roger Hodkinson and Dr. Francis Christian and his wife, and Dr. Eric Payne, James Peloso, Ryan Olson, and a group of us. So we got out there and went to work. We ended up going to the kind of the battleship center, which was like the war room. There was a gentleman who had booked out 2 floors so that we could all come together and work and support the truckers behind the scenes with the political activism and stuff. Anyway, it was amazing. I really didn't know what I was going to do. I thought I might be there for a weekend. And every day I'd wake up and say, okay, God, well, you let me know what I need to be doing if I'm supposed to still be here. And, he'd put me to work for 16, 17 hours a day. It was insane. And so, yeah, by the time I drove back and got back to my kids, it was 5 weeks, and it was long and it was tedious, but it was amazing. Saw lots of darkness, but saw lots of light. And, it was amazing. It was like the Freedom Olympics. It was like Woodstock for Canada. It was just, everything they said was a lie. Everything they said on mainstream media was a lie. Just if anyone's wondering, I don't think anyone that believes that's probably watching your show, but it was incredible. I've never felt more safe in my life walking outside at 11 o'clock at night. I've never hugged so many people in my life, and I am a hugger. And so it was great. Yeah. And from that, I met a network of people that, it's like going to war with somebody. It's this spontaneous action. And then you're with these people and you're working day and night together. You'll never forget each other. You'll always be in each other's lives. And, we're still working behind the scenes now. That's what led me to getting involved with Taking Back Our Freedoms and starting our own show, Canada Connect. And, just keep uncovering the truth and trying to connect Canadians, whether vaccinated, unvaccinated, it doesn't matter. We've all been duped, and it's about exposing that and then uniting. and then making these people accountable who have destroyed our society.
Yeah, no serious person, I think, cares about vaccinated or unvaccinated anymore.
No,
Like
no.
it's not about that. And it's not about left or right or liberal or conservative. It is just about, do you believe that you should live in a free country that respects its citizens? And do you feel like as a citizen you should respect the other citizens that you're surrounded with? I think that's what it's become, and it's actually the most exciting part for me. I didn't I wasn't really interested at all in politics before really COVID-19. And then at the front end of my, we'll call it political education, it becomes very divisive very quickly and very partisan. And I think now that, I'm 2.5 years into that kind of journey of like understanding how that machine works, like I don't care. I don't care about left or right. I don't care about liberal or conservative. It's not the thing that matters. It's the integrity of the individual, and whether or not you align with this idea that we should be sovereign.
That's right. Yeah. And you know what? There's a really great meme out there. It's a picture of, and it's like true, but it's a picture of black ants and red ants in a jar. And so if you put black ants and red ants in a jar, they'll live harmoniously together. They're all like running around. And then if you put a lid on it and you shake the jar, they'll start killing each other. And what we have to do as a race, as a collective, a human collective, is look up and see whose hand is it that's shaking the jar. We have to remember that when we feel divided from our fellow human being, these are all divisions that have been manipulated. They've been manufactured, right? They will let you have any kind of protest other than freedom. Think about that. Black Lives Matter, about the natives, LGBTQ, blah, blah, blah. But
Abortion's another
anything,
big one right now.
abortion, but anything to do with unity that includes everyone. And the spirit of freedom is the essence of being human. They won't let you do it. They won't let you do
Huh.
it. They have to lie about it. They have to say it's something else. They have to find the divisive piece because they're terrified that we will unite. And that's all we have to do. That's all we have to do is come together from our hearts, turn around and look at these people and they'll be running.
Huh. That's amazing. I hadn't thought about that before. That's important. I know I said we were going to close with Ottawa, but then you said something else super, super interesting. Can we talk about the attack on men?
Yeah. I think it's really important for especially women like myself to study that because we'll be a stronger voice for the men, because women have been a part of the attack on men and have been manipulated to do such. So there has been for decades on women as well. I think that even the feminist movement was an attack on women. I think that these things start off noble and then they get hijacked by these ruling elites and they get money thrown at it and then the division starts, right? It's always about the breakup of the family. So if you look in the last 10, 20 years at even just, let's say, the sitcoms on TV, Family Guy, Homer Simpson, King of Queens, Al Bundy, it's always some beer drinking Olaf who sits on the couch with his, and the woman's running around. She's got a full-time job. She's taking care of the kids. Movies like Bad Moms, movies like Bad Grandpa or Dirty Grandpa. Like, you have to start looking at what they're feeding us all the time. It's all garbage, right? But they know, and this goes back to the behavioral psychology, that what goes on the screen gets put out in the communities, right? So, the single mom for the last 20 years has been a big theme. Just the useless dad. And the woman's always berating the man. Like, if you look at the wives of these characters on TV, they're always just like, ugh, they're just disgusted with them, right? They're just like, ugh, right? And so we naturally as humans mimic behavior. So when you're a child, your subconscious is picking up on all of these. Oh, this is how relationships are. This is how it needs to be. I'm even guilty of myself of having thoughts back in the day that men were useless and, they're just, tyrants and like, what do I need them for? And blah, 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 blah. Or, realized even with my own husband, sorry, I have to say sorry now to all my past boyfriends or you know, how I maybe treated them in the past. Um, but it's clear that there's a psychological attack to emasculate them, right? Because think about it, if you were going to take over the world and you were the evildoers, and this goes back centuries, you take out the men first, right? Because evil is always after the children and the women and the children. So if you take out the men, the women will get raped and the children will get whatever all day long. This is how it goes. This is how it's always gone. You just look at a history book. So how do they do that? So they've been doing it slowly. It's like a slow drip to emasculate the man. Brainwash, trauma based mind control, hypnotic rhythm, where they don't even know who they are, right? There's a chemical attack on men. You look at the soy, you look at some of the things that they talk about that they're putting in the food. And there was a guy in specifically who did a test on the frogs, and it was making the frogs gay, like what they were putting in the water. Now, I'm just going to make a disclaimer. I love my gay friends. I have no problem with any of that. But what I'm saying is that's where we're not allowed to talk about these things. That's another part of the plan, right? Is, well, you can't talk about that stuff because you're going to offend somebody. No, no, no. We need to unlift the veil here and look at what's really going on. Like, this is an actual thing. And then the guy tries to come out with the study, and he gets threatened by the pharmaceutical companies and loses his job for coming out with the study that shows that what they're putting in the water is actually doing this to the frogs. So if you think they're not doing this to animals and that can't happen to humans, it happens, right?
Is that
It's
the fluoride?
happening.
Are you talking about fluoride?
No, I'm not talking about fluoride. It was something else that they were putting in the water. But yeah, fluoride is just a whole nother demon, right? Neurotoxin of trying to slowly poison and kill us over time, for sure. And that they're now just introducing into Calgary. They've just passed the vote after a 23-year battle. I mean, it's crazy. It's just crazy, right? But specifically, the attack on men, men need to realign. They need to find, there's a lowerment of testosterone. It's the food that we eat. It's the lack of, physical activity. It's the city dwelling and the living. It's, if you look on at the magazines, the men are feminized. They're the pointy shoes. They're androgynous looking. The women too. It's all this push. The transgender movement is a push also to no gender at all, right? It is the ultimate, it's the ultimate, it's like a ritual of, I mean, this is really deep, but you have to go back to like understanding Baphomet and who these people worship. But anyway, in men and specifically are targeted because, and then the women and the children are an easy prey. And so you just have to do your own research. Women need to start empowering the men. Jason Christoff is my self-sabotage coach, and you can listen to all his podcasts for free, and he has great citations on the attack specifically on men, and he's got a program for men only. He's creating a hashtag called Men to the Front. Now, I want you to think about this for a second. I've been to every protest you can imagine. Women, grandma, children, peace, love, woohoo, yeah, yeah, yeah. What we need and what we have always needed is 5,000 men to get together and go to a protest outside Parliament. And I'm not perpetuating violence here, but what I'm saying is that they would get a far different reaction from 5,000 men standing up and saying, we're not taking this anymore. We're done that you're hurting our children and our families, than having all of us old people and moms and kids out there. Okay. So why hasn't that happened? I mean, it did a bit with the trucker movement, but this is what we have to get back to. Men are here. It is your divine right. And it is your, it is your duty to protect the women and the children and the most vulnerable of society. That is the way it's always been. You were designed for this. And anything or anyone that tells you differently is off their rocker. And women have to come back in alignment and respect their men and realize that and empower their men to do so. So when he created the hashtag Men to the Front, he means it. There's a time when animals battle or when men battle, and you need to get out of the way. The women and the children need to get out of the way. And this whole idea of women can do it all and the feminists and get out of the house was all designed to break up the family. And I'm not saying women shouldn't work, and I'm not saying they shouldn't go pursue their passions, but the ideas that were planted that we should do it all and we should be working and not stay at home and what Oh, hand over our children to government institutions and government funded daycares. Right. Now, if you just take a bird's eye view and you understand that there's like an evil group of people that are trying to destroy like humanity and control the human farm, you can see why these things all happened. But you have to put the dots together for yourself. So the attack on men is real. This is why you see them out there putting on their own face masks and doubling it up on their child. They have no idea who they are anymore. They've been, pounded on and emasculated so much over their lifetime that they've just become a complete beta male. And we have to get back to finding our inner alpha, women too. And that starts with empowering our men. So I'm all for men's meetings, men meetups, men getting together on their own. There's nothing sexist about it. Get going. Find your tribe of men and empower each other. And let's recreate a new society.
I love that. Thank you so much for saying that. That's, I mean, yeah, if I can just speak honestly, it's hard. It's weird because, in my own specific situation, I'm white and I'm a male, so obviously I'm privileged, right? And
Mhm.
and I say that sarcastically.
Mhm.
Um, but there's not been a lot of space to talk about this idea that like, oh, because you're white and you're a male, you're actually now at the bottom of the totem pole. We don't need you because
Mhm.
you're not a minority and you're not marginalized and you're doing just fine, so you're useless. And I think that is
Mhm.
very intentional too. And I just want to thank you for saying what you did, because it is the man's responsibility to step up and to be at the front. And you're right. But to hear a smart and strong woman talk about empowering men is well, it's to be honest, it's music to my ears because you don't hear that. And
Mhm.
it's regardless of whether or not you do hear that, it's still our responsibility as men to step forward. But I just want to thank you for being the woman that you are and for having an ear tuned to the problem. That's there's
Mhm.
there's hope in that, and I really appreciate you saying that.
That's lovely. And I do have to say that anytime that I have said this on air, I've had phone calls and emails like coming in immediately from people saying thank you. So, like I can tell that this is what people need to hear, and so that's why I really believe it's important for women to acknowledge even their own participation in it, and ask for forgiveness almost, and understand the bigger agenda, and then share that. It's important. Yeah, absolutely.
And on the topic of feminism, again, I'm not going to remember the author's name, but there's a book called The Flip Side of Feminism, that I
Mm.
think takes a very respectful, alternate perspective on feminism because it's very easy for you to say, oh, you don't believe in feminism. Well, you don't think women should have rights. You don't think women should work. No, none of those things.
Mhm.
Obviously, stop being
Mhm.
dumb. But
Right.
there is if you believe in the coordination, the thing they need to break is the family unit. And the way you break the family unit is you emasculate the man, you send the woman to work, and you send the kids to government education. And that's how you break
Bingo.
the family. And we have to have conversations about that.
Sorry.
That's okay. Well, Tasha, thank you so much for joining us. This has been a fascinating and enlightening conversation. Is there anything else that you would like to leave with the listeners before we go?
Yeah, I shouldn't have cayenne pepper in my my juice when I'm on a podcast. Sorry about that, folks. Um, I would just I would leave them with, if they're questioning their government, if they no longer trust the government and the institutions that we have before us, to really consider the institutions that are also funded by the government. And I know that a lot of parents will say, I love my teacher, or I have a good teacher or a good principal. And absolutely, there's wonderful people that work in the system. But I just want to remind people that those people have zero control over what they're teaching your kids. And they're never going to leave their job that pays them $60,000 to $110,000 a year, because they'll never get paid that anywhere else. Any of the good ones have already left because they knew what was coming, or they didn't take the vaccine, or whatever happened there. And it's not that they're not good, but they're going to teach your child whatever they're told to teach your child. Their fiduciary duty is to be a beacon of knowledge and light for our children. And they're unable to do that in the social structure and the system that they're working in. So, in my opinion, these people can't be trusted. They cannot be trusted with our children at this time. And if you are a teacher listening to this out there and you're a good teacher, go start something else. Get outside of the system and do something else and be the light and be the beacon of knowledge that you're supposed to and intended to be. And people will follow. But what we have right now is a pile of garbage, and it is very toxic. And it is as bad as it's worse than I'm saying. So if you feel any of those feelings, use your intuition, use your discernment, and go do your research and pull your kids out of school. That's what I would say.
All right. Well, thank you so much, Tasha. I appreciate your time, and thanks for being here.
Thanks, Zach. Appreciate it.
Thank you for listening to The Canadian Story. You can find us on Instagram and Twitter at The CAD Story. That's The CAD Story. If you enjoy this podcast, please share it with your friends and family. Let's work together to remind Canadians how great our country is.